Listen only mode.
So hi all and welcome to the Crème interview tips webinar. Thank you to all for joining us. We've over 500 people registered, so that's great this evening. We'd love to hear your feedback after this, but due to the high number of people listening this evening, we actually won't be able to answer your questions live. But if you do want to email any questions, if we miss anything out at all, we'll actually compile a frequently asked questions guide and we'll share this with you shortly. So who am I? So just a brief summary. I'm actually a recruitment consultant on the Crème desk here in Cork on the temporary team. So me and my team here, we would run through this prep with candidates frequently. So we just want to share our experience with you all. So what we'll be covering today is the basics. So the basics would be pre-interview preparation. So, common interview questions, and we'll also explain the STAR technique, the competency-based questions and what are they, and any questions for the employer at the end of the interview. So, just to let you know, we are on Twitter as well. You can tweet us live, a hashtag #LaCrèmeWebinar. You can ask us questions this way as well, and we can come back to you. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's at @LaCrème_Ireland, and on LinkedIn, we are LaCrème as well. So get following. Okay, so to kick off, waste no time. The basics would be about selling yourself. So your interview is your way that you can sell yourself in an interview. So just a few tips for you, and you know, these should be quite obvious, I know you'll be saying, but they are kind of a few, you know, errors that we do come up against. So we suggest to ensure that you are punctual. So 10 minutes is the recommended time that we'd say arrive to an interview, 10 minutes early. Don't be too early because the interviewer could be in another meeting and you could distract them from that meeting, which won't be appreciated. So 10 minutes is about the correct amount of time to be early. Also know the exact location of where you are to report to and who you are to ask for. A lot of people actually do a practice run the night before. Just to know the route and to know the time that it will take you as well to get to the location. If you are interviewing through ourselves here, we'll always give you a time, say report to main reception for 9 a.m. and ask for Lauren Hendry. You know, we'd always give you a name to ask for, so just make sure you know that. Wear the appropriate attire. So for this, you know, business attire, it doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg. You can run down to Penny's and get a black blazer, you know, suit buttons, or a skirt and a nice blouse for not so much. So, you know, it doesn't have to cost you a bum. Switch off your phone. This is an error that a lot of people make. Even having your phone on vibrate can cause a distraction, just as much as if your phone was ringing. So do ensure that your phone is switched off. Also, stand up when the interviewer arrives. So whether you've been put in the interview room or whether you are in a waiting area, do stand up when the interviewer arrives, just out of respect, and give them a firm handshake. Again, you can practice this with a friend. Just make sure you know that it is not too firm, and you don't want a weak handshake as well. You want to, you know, make them know that you are there for business. Maintain eye contact throughout the interview. Also minimise fidgeting. So we suggest not taking a copy of your own CV to an interview because they should have this already, and to put your hands on your lap as well so you're not kind of flapping your arms about, and also build rapport with the interviewer. Now by this, kind of read the situation. If your interviewer is very personable, then, you know, take that on board, and mirror that. If the interviewer is a little bit more direct, also notice that too. They might just want you to get to the point and might not want to know about the weather outside. So just bear that in mind. So they're the basics covered anyway. Okay, so preparing for an interview after a long job search can be one of the most stressful and nerve-wracking times of any job seeker's life. You're not entirely sure what questions will be asked or what to expect at all. But just to let you know, on average in the market in Ireland at the moment, a typical job ad could get up to 200 applications. So do take a deep breath and relax, as you've come a long way in being one of the very few chosen for interview. Normally around 4 people are chosen for interview for any role, so you know you've done very well. Be positive that your CV has the skill set that they're looking for, but now it is up to you to sell yourself. This is your chance. Your CV can get you so far, but the rest is on your shoulders. So what we would suggest is a bit of pre-interview prep, okay? So this is really important to research the company website. By this, you can find out when the company first started, you can find out what the company does, even their employees might be listed on the website, and also their values will be on the website as well. So any company that you're going into, if it's the right career move for you, your values should match their values. You can always incorporate their values into your interview as well by using them as competencies if you see any kind of relation in your own experience. Also, you can search the interviewer on LinkedIn. Now, not being too much of a stalker, and not in that sense, but just make sure your profile on LinkedIn is set to private. This is just to get a bit of a background on the interviewer, just for your own peace of mind. Like, they're only human at the end of the day, but it's just to kind of see what their career path maybe has been, and just to reiterate that they are only human. So also search news articles and recent announcements. So you can do this on Google Search. They actually have a news section. So it's always good if they've announced, say, a number of jobs in the recent months. That indicates growth, which you can always ask about at the end of an interview, where it's great with you going into a role there. You know that the company is doing well if they are making announcements like that. It's always good for you to have the background knowledge on a company and being fully prepared before you go in the door. So we've lined up a few of the common interview questions that we do see popping up here frequently. So every interview is different, and that's guaranteed. We even know that with the clients that we work with. But there are some very common interview questions that do come up frequently. I've given a few examples here, and I'll just go through them, and then I'll give you some advice on actually how to answer them. So one of the ones that we do see coming up often are, what do you know about the company? So use your research for this. If you've done your research on the company, on their website, etc., use your research here. Have about 3 or 4 sentences about the company. So you could use what they do, how many employees they have, when they started out, who their clients are, etc. Anything that's kind of relative or that you've seen on the website, just so they know that you've bothered to do a bit of research. Now, the interviewers themselves will probably already know this about the company, but it just shows your interest that you have gone on and you've done that research. So don't feel like you're boring them to tears. Actually go on, do your research, and you'll come across as very knowledgeable and very interested in the role as well. The next one is, tell me about yourself. So this comes up really often. Now, just to let you know, they don't want to know what your relationship status is on Facebook. They actually just want a brief summary about your experience that's relevant to the role. So keep the job spec in mind at all times. Describe your experience, and normally what I'd suggest is to start with your qualifications. So if they're relevant, okay? So you can say that you graduated in 2008 and that you graduated in such and such a degree, and that you come out with a 2-1 honours degree, if relevant to the role. Then work up your brief work experience up to your current day. So start with your oldest job and bring it up to the current day, focusing in on the roles that are most important to that role, where the duties are transferable, use them, and then bring it up to kind of why you're there in that interview on that day. I would end that example with, I'm here today because I'm actually looking for a new challenge. You can say why you're there, and then kind of end the example there. You don't want to fill the silence. Let there be a silence. It means that you've ended the answer and that you're ready for the next question. So don't be afraid and don't start to fill in the silence, because you will find yourself rambling on and you'll find that you're repeating yourself. If you've answered all you can answer, stop and wait for the next question. There's nothing wrong with that. Use examples at all times as well. So the next one we've got here are, why are you leaving your current role? So for this one, it's a little bit tricky sometimes, but we do say that honesty is key, but to not give too much away in your answer, okay? So if you didn't leave your last employer on the best of terms, do not slate them at any opportunity. Do not slate them. You have to be respectful of previous employers. You can get around this by kind of saying that you gain valuable experience with a company, but that you do feel the need to move on at this current time. Any negativity can imply a level of disloyalty, which is a trait that few employers do seek. So just make sure when you are answering this question that you do keep it positive. You focus on the skills and experience that you did you did build up, rather than, you know, what was taken away from your career progression or experience with that company. So always be positive. You want to leave a positive kind of ring in their mind. Next question. So what are your strengths? So we recommend you answer with around 3 key skills. So have a look at the job spec and what competencies have they put on that job spec that they're looking for in a candidate. This will give you a good understanding of what they want, how they want you to answer this question, okay? So I've named 3 key skills and have a short example for each as well. Do be passionate when you're given these examples and don't read them off as kind of chores or that they're so rehearsed, because the interviewer will know, do you know, if these are just read from a textbook. For example, if you think your 3 key strengths relevant to this role would be, say, strong communication skills, I'm a good team player, and I enjoy process improvement and maximising productivity, then you need an example for each of those. Now, it can be a short example, but you definitely do need an example, just so you're kind of translating the experience into real life, because anyone could write that they are, you know, they have strong attention to detail and so on, but you need to have an example from your recent experience where you've actually put this into practice. Okay, so moving on to what is your greatest weakness. Now, nobody enjoys this question at all. It's not natural to be in an interview situation, trying to be selling yourself, and then you've got to give a negative about yourself. But the interviewer isn't trying to catch you out, okay? Don't dodge the question. No matter what you do, don't kind of say, I have no weaknesses at all, right? We all have a weak point that maybe we've noticed in the past and we do need to work on, or we have worked on. So you always want to kind of answer this question past tense. Be honest without being detrimental to the interview though. So talk about a weakness that you've had, right? And that you've recognised and how you've worked to overcome it. You always want to end on a positive. So, for example, for this one, right, if I was to give an example to you, if your weakness was prioritization, okay, and you could say that, okay, when I started my last role, I actually struggled to prioritize my workload. I found that I had a lot on in a day, you know, and I didn't know kind of how to prioritize what was urgent and what was not. Now, you know, I have rectified that. In my last role, I actually started writing a lot of lists. I'd write daily lists and I prioritise in terms of, you know, what was most urgent and what could be pushed out to, say, the end of the day, or what could be pushed out to tomorrow without having any kind of repercussions. This way I learned to prioritise, I learned to do the big tasks, do what was needed and prioritise my workload and get everything done in due course. It's now actually a strength of mine in any role that I go into now, because I, you know, think first, I write a list and my list is there for me to work through. Always end with a positive outcome. Okay, so always use examples. Now, what we would go on to next is the STAR technique, okay? So them examples there and them questions are frequently asked questions that do come up in a lot of interviews, okay? But a lot of what we're seeing more of are competency-based questions. So for these, we would recommend the STAR technique. So the STAR technique is a universally recognised format that actually enables you to provide a relevant and complete example to any competency-based questions that's asked, okay? So the STAR technique is used the acronym STAR, which stands for situation, task, action, and result, okay? So step 1 is situation or task. So for this, you need to describe the situation that you were confronted with or the task that needed to be accomplished. You need to set the context. So for example, you need to say that you're letting the interviewer feel the situation and you need to let them be drawn into the situation, okay? So if the question was asking you to describe a situation where you had to deal with a difficult person, you have to explain how you came to meet the person in the first place and why they were being difficult, okay? So just create a story. Every story needs a start, a beginning and an ending. You need to bring the interviewer into the situation. Okay, so now that you've set the scene, you now need to explain what it is that you actually did. This is the most important section of the STAR approach, as it's where you'll need to demonstrate and highlight the skills and personal attributes that the question is actually testing. So you need to explain what you did, okay? So for example, if the question was testing your customer service skills, okay, you need to explain what skills you actually displayed in that situation. So you could be saying, you know, that you use listening skills, that you would talk softly, you know, if confronted by an irate or difficult customer or, you know, client or so on. As you're describing or explaining the situation, you're kind of softly dropping in these skills, which are getting picked up by the interviewer at every stage, okay, without you kind of saying, well, I have listening skills and I have, you know, communication skills. They're softly being introduced to the situation, and this is the action that you did use. Just a couple of tips about just explaining the action. Always use I and not us, because you need to get across that you're explaining your own skills and not the team skills. You know, this is your interview. You need to say what skills you have that are transferable, not the team. And also a big one that I've come across in the past is stay clear of lingo. So we've all been in a situation where we've been in a company for a while, you know, and we're so used to using their day-to-day lingo in terms of system names, process names, and so on. Just stay clear of these, because the interviewer will not have a clue what you are talking about. You need to give a clear and precise example of what you did, using, you know, basic language that they can understand as well. So it's just a case of explaining what you did properly. The third step then is result, okay? So explain what happened eventually, how it all ended, okay? So use the opportunity to describe what you accomplished by this and also what you learned in that situation. This helps you to make the answer more personable, and it also enables you to highlight any further skills, you know, softly introduce some further skills again. So always end on a positive and always round the example off. So, for example, if you were to be talking about an event or so on, say how the event ended, you know, did it receive good feedback, you know, always keep the result positive to highlight your skills and not your weaknesses. So with the STAR approach explained there, now we need to kind of find out what are these competency-based questions, and when will we need to use the STAR technique. So competency-based questions are actually a growing trend. We're seeing them pop up more and more in interviews at the moment. They actually provide an insight into a potential employee's skill set, rather than like just using their run-of-the-mill CV. Like the CV could provide like, you know, their skill set, but these competency-based questions where they're asking you for real-life examples, an interviewer will get so much more insight into your skills. It's what can make the difference if the employer could get to see how you apply these skills in the workplace, okay? So these usually relate to areas such as influencing, communication, management, collaboration, and also conflict resolution. These are the most common competency-based questions that we've seen pop up from time to time. So having an example for each of these skills, depending on the role that you're going for, is great preparation. So competency-based questions, so examples of these. We've just kind of provided a few examples here that we've seen pop up, and these are actually the ones that you'd want to have covered off for sure. In any interview situation, first round, second round, you'd want to have examples for these. Any example that you make for these can then be tailored into other questions that are asked, but as long as you've got these, you know, examples in your head, they can then be tailored to any other question that an interview asks. So if the examples that we give here, right, would be asked in a way where they ask kind of, can you give me an example of when? And you have to name the situation. So the first one we've got is you had to work under a great deal of pressure. So for this, using the STAR technique, what you would say is you would set the scene, okay? So you would name the company that you were in at the time of the example that you're using. You'd name the role that you were in. You'd explain actually what caused this extra pressure. Do you know? So say the example you're using is that you have an event coming up, okay? And you have to complete your normal everyday duties as well as organise this event. So you set the scene, okay? So you name the company, the role, you say the event is coming up, you say what the event is, you say how many people are expected to attend and so on. You actually give the interviewer a sense of the pressure that you were under at the time. You cause that pressure, okay? You stress that pressure that you were under at the time. Step 2 then would be the action and also the skills that you used, okay? So the skills in this situation, would be, for example, prioritization, would be organizational skills, and you kind of name what action that you took. So that you would write a list and you would say what's urgent, bringing it back to the previous example, writing a list, doing what was urgently needed then, and also not kind of forgetting about your normal everyday duties. You need to reiterate that too. And then result, what was the outcome? So was the task accomplished? So if your example was to do with an event, right, for example, say the event was a great success at the end of the example, Like, don't be afraid to big yourself up. Like, don't be afraid to be selling yourself. It's kind of in our nature not to do this, naturally. And it's hard for us to take a compliment and so on. But an interview is a situation where you need to throw that out the window. You actually need to say, if you receive good feedback for that event, now is the time to say it. You actually need to let the interviewer know that the event was greatly received, that you got great feedback, that your employers were delighted with, the work that you put into it, and with the feedback from the customer as well. So just make sure you round off the example with, showing off your skill set and what you did achieve from that and what would be transferable to this role as well. Again, think of the skills that you've used. Like, skills can be transferable for each example. So take, for instance, you've had to deal with an irate customer or an irate client. Again, you're using customer service skills, you're using, your listening skills again, which can be used in a number of examples. So just list out what would be your strengths and use them for different examples that you can think of from your recent work experience. Also give an example of when you've had to work in a team. And also think of an example of when you've had to deal with conflict in the workplace, okay? Again, you'd use your listening skills, like the same skills that you'd have for customer service, you'd have for conflict in the workplace, okay? So it's them soft skills that would also bring your personality into play as well, so don't forget about them. Just think of the skills that you'd use for the others and just kind of, tailor them as the question does come up. Leading on to questions for the employer. So an interview is a two-way process, okay? So you need to be prepared before you walk into that interview with a couple of questions that you'd actually like to get out of the interview process yourself. So a couple of questions that we would recommend you asking is, what's the work environment like, okay? If you don't already know this, please don't ask questions that have already been covered in the interview, because it'll sound like you haven't been listening. So if these are covered off at any stage, just beware and just hold back asking, even if you've got them prepared. Things in the interview will pop up that you'd want to ask at the end, but these are just a couple of examples, okay? So what's the work environment like? What do you enjoy about working for this company? So you can ask the interviewer directly, what do they enjoy about working for the company? They will tell you directly what they like about the company, and it'll mean that you get a greater insight into what they kind of, their company mentality is. Also, how many is in the team? Hopefully this would have come up in the interview. If it hasn't for any reason, ask it at the end. We'd say to keep questions relevant to the role and the company, as it shows your interest. So no question is too small, We would say steer away from salary. If you are going through a role through ourselves, we can ask this for you. Just because you don't want the interviewer to think, that you are kind of orientated towards the money side of things, as opposed to the actual career change and career progression, or the role itself. So stay away from the role. You can ask about training and so on, but we do kind of recommend to stay away from career progression, just because you're interviewing for this role and not the role ahead. So just keep your questions focused to this role. You can always ask at a later date about progression. That's one thing we would say. Okay, so a few final things. We always suggest to leave the interviewer with a positive impression. We always say, take your personality with you to the interview. Be positive and be enthusiastic, but at the same time, do be engaged and interested in what the interviewer has to say. They have to feel like you actually want the job that you're interviewing for. A lot of the time, if you're in an interview situation, nerves can get the better of you. Don't let these nerves ruin your interview. Like, nerves are good and nerves are natural, and they make you perform 110% because you put your all into it. But at the same time, nerves can be a little bit detrimental if you let them get the better of you. So just remember, you've done so well getting to this stage, getting the interview. You've been shortlisted. You're going to have a face-to-face now with this interviewer that's deciding on, the opportunity of this role. Just be delighted that you've got there, you know. Be positive, enthusiastic, let your personality shine through, and always ask your consultant for feedback after the interview as well. Whether you got the job or not, look, feedback is constructive and you can always take things on board for your next interview. Always thank the interviewer for their time as well. And you know, a strong handshake again is always fully appreciated. You know, you always want to leave them with that positive impression. So that's it. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation now. If there is anything that we haven't covered, please feel free to send in your questions. My email address is up there now. It's lhenry@lecrème.ie. I'd be more than happy to offer advice. Thank you so much for your time. I really hope that that's been beneficial and really helps you out in the future. We will be sending out a frequently asked questions form too. So look, if you do have any questions, okay, we've been unable to answer them live on here just with the number that's attending at the moment. But we will consider all these questions, right? And we will send out a frequently asked questions form. So send them in and we will get back to you. Good luck to you all. Check out our website for any live roles that we've got at the moment. And we do look forward to working with you in the future. And all the best on your job search. Thanks a million for your time.